In this section, we're going to discuss counting populations. That can be human populations or animal populations, tree populations, fungus populations, really anything in nature. This is an incredibly important topic to environmental scientists because biodiversity is one of the underpinnings for environmental health. So let's talk about a couple of vocab words. What is a population? A population is all of the individuals of a species that live together in an area. So this would mean, all of the mice in a field or all of the deer in a particular contiguous forest. There are factors that affect populations: size, density, dispersion patterns. These are all things that play into the health, the well-being of the population, as well as the health of all the other populations that are living in a given area. Demography. Demography is the study of populations. And when we study populations, we are able to make predictions about how those populations will change into the future. Determining population size and density. You can see at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, that's a pack of water buffalo. So how do we start to learn about those water buffalo? How do we start to count them, determine the number of buffalo per mile, those sorts of things? There are three ways to determine population size and density. Count every individual. This can be really hard. Sometimes environments are incredibly large. Sometimes animals that are in that environment are very good at hiding. So imagine the idea of having to go out into your backyard and count every grasshopper or every blade of grass. It's just not a reasonable way to count a population. The thing is that having the exact count is, generally speaking, not that valuable. We want to have a good idea about how many are out there overall, but counting every single one would be so time and labor intensive and in many ways impossible that, generally speaking, environmental scientists don't use this method. I'm not saying they never use it. So if we're talking about a critically endangered species, where really knowing exactly how many of this item there are. So for example, there was a spotted owl, very highly endangered, outside of State College. PennDOT wanted to put a road through to widen the road into State College, and individuals went out into the surrounding forests and worked to find every single one of these spotted owls in its location, to make sure that the highway was not going to cut through or cut off those individuals from each other and from their natural habitat. Because when you have critically endangered animals, obviously the need for environmental protection is higher. Random sampling. Random sampling means that you take an area, a quadrant. Depending on the size and the type of the species, that can vary greatly. If it's something like how much grass is in your yard, a 1 by 1 meter would be more than enough to get a good idea about how much grass there is in general. If you're looking at something like, say, a red-tailed hawk, several square miles would be an appropriate habitat or count for that. Why? Because red-tailed hawks are at the top of the ecosystem. They're tertiary or quaternary consumers. In other words, they're the third or the fourth level consumer up. And so there wouldn't be anywhere near as many of them as there would be, say, blades of grass. Mark and recapture. This works really well for things in an environment where it's really hard, even in a set area, to catch all of the items. For example, say trout or bass or snails. You want to be able to take them, mark them, put them back out there so that you get a generalized idea of how many there are, and so you're not counting the same individual more than once. Different types of population densities. What are the benefits and the drawbacks? I want you to look at these two methods of farming. I'd like you to look at the method on the left And I'd like you to look at the method on the right. Hopefully, as you look at these, you can think in your mind about why there would be benefits and drawbacks to both methods. I'm just going to be quiet for a moment and let you look at them and let you think if you can come up with 2 benefits and 2 drawbacks to each side. Okay, over on the left, this is going to be a much more industrial level farming. There are a lot of people in the world. There are a lot of people in America. There is a lot of demand for meat. And as much as we would like to have all animals be able to live outside and free range, to meet the demand that we have in the American market, and also including the fact that we do export meat to other markets, you need to have a more industrial bent towards that farming. So the one on the left allows you to group the animals together. It allows you to feed the animals food that's not grass. That allows you to bulk them up more quickly. But of course, the drawbacks are that those animals do not get the nutrition and the happiness that they might. It's not as ethical necessarily, but it does feed the population that we have. Then we look at the one on the right. There are lots of benefits here. Look at the fact that those sheep are on grass. Look at the fact that those sheep potentially, imagine that every collared sheep was actually a different species. So maybe, or subspecies, maybe we're able to breed, let's say the yellow collared sheep, they're really good for meat. But the red collared sheep are really good for wool, for sweaters. But then maybe the orange collared sheep, maybe those guys are a little bit more drought resistant. And look at the purple sheep. Maybe the purple sheep, have a really hyperallergenic wool. Different, types of sheep or different cultivars of sheep can breed for different reasons. And so industrial farming on the left, benefits and drawbacks. A more, I guess, specific or small time kind of farming on the right also has benefits and drawbacks. And remember, if you just do it by sheer numbers, look how many more sheep you can get into the industrial area than you can into the area where they're not eating all the grass off the ground. Animals have many different types of pattern dispersal. In other words, how they find themselves in their environment. If you look at clumped is one of the most common, and it's there because animals tend to clump themselves around things that are beneficial, around their homes, around water, around food, around resources that are going to allow them to have the best possible outcomes. Then you have uniform. This is things like lions. If you looked at the entire African veldt, you get a reasonably even dispersal of male lions because male lions don't clump up, don't hang out in packs. They will be the leader of a pride potentially, but generally when it's not breeding season, they disperse themselves out in a uniform manner and defend their territory. Random. Random's really uncommon. And the reason is because things are either generally falling into the hostile one or into the clumped one. There's very little in the world that's random. And a lot of times when something appears to be random, it's just because we don't understand the species perfectly. Population and evolution. An organism's fitness is calculated by the number of offspring that it produces. Basically, in genetics and in evolution, the only thing that matters is getting your genes to the next generation. That's it. So if you look at someone like me, my parents spent all of this time raising me. They raised me up, they fed me, they housed me, they clothed me, they educated me. But evolutionarily speaking, I'm an evolutionary dead end. I don't ever intend to have offspring. I don't ever intend to reproduce. So that makes my actual evolutionary fitness really low. Humans have this ability to decide. Most organisms will pass on their genes at any cost, as aggressively as possible. Humans are one of the very few that actually can select to limit their population numbers. This has benefits and drawbacks, and as we look at world populations, we're going to look at that. This is going to be our next section, R and K related species.